live according to the one truth, that you must live in such a way as may be best for you and your family. In the words of Ecclesiastes, he undertook great things. He built himself houses, and planted vineyards. He made gardens and groves, and placed in them all manner of fruit trees. He made himself cisterns for the watering of the groves. He got himself men servants and maid servants, and he became great and rich, and wisdom dwelt with him. And yet there lies the dread of death lurking always in the dim background. Brave enough when confronted with actual danger, he was yet terrified at the thought of passing into nothingness. The truth as he came now to see it consisted in casting out the desire of lands and money, so he determined to leave his home, his wife, his children, his lands, to give away his 600,000 kopecks and become a beggar. I shall look, he says, for my friends among the peasants. No woman can stand to me in the place of a friend. Why do we deceive our wives by pretending to consider them our best friends? For it certainly is not true. Woman is, in all respects, morally man's inferior. Nowadays, writes his biographer, Leo behaves to his wife with a touch of exactingness, reproachfulness, and even displeasure, accusing her of preventing him from giving away his property, and going on bringing up the children in the old way. His wife, for her part, thinks herself in the right, and complains of such conduct on her husband's side. In her there has involuntarily sprung up a hatred and loathing of his teaching and its consequences. Between them there has even grown up a tone of mutual contradiction, the voicing of their complaints against one another. Giving away one's property to strangers and leaving one's children on the world, when no one else is disposed to do the same, she not only looks on as out of the question, but thinks it her duty as a mother to prevent. Should I not have gone with him, she cries, if I had not had young children? But he has forgotten everything in his doctrines. Then comes the final decision. Leo's wife, in order to preserve the property for her children, was prepared to ask the authorities to appoint a committee to manage the property. Not wishing to oppose his wife by force, he began to assume towards his property an attitude of ignoring its existence, renounced his income, proceeded to shut his eyes to what became of it, and ceased to make use of it, except in so far as to go on living under the roof of the house at Yasnaya Polyana. His wife continues to look after his wants and turns a blind eye to his doctrines. She is always ready to help him. Even if he seems ungrateful and says that his wife is no friend of his, she finds comfort in the realization that he cannot get along without her for a day, and that she has made him what he is. Life becomes one golden holiday. There is an air of infectious jollity pervading the household. He finds sheer animal delight in his physical vigor, and yet, is he not thinking of himself, as usual, when he writes, "One refined life, led in moderation and within the bounds of decency, of what is commonly called a virtuous household, one family life, absorbing as many working days as would suffice to maintain thousands of the poor that live in misery hard by, does more to corrupt people than thousands of wild orgies by coarse tradesmen, officers or artisans given to drunkenness or debauchery, who smash mirrors and crockery for sheer fun. It was at this time that he found out that his books were becoming a source of commercial prosperity to him. At first he refused to listen when there was talk of money in connection with his books, but the Countess, to secure the future of her children, stood firm. Tolstoy was, as is well known, remarkable for the few friendships which he formed. The notable exception is, of course, Turgenev, who wrote of him, "His chief fault consists in the absence of spiritual freedom. He is an egotist to the marrow of his bones." Despite his constant asseveration that he always confesses everything, this is the one trait he dare not divulge, even to himself. Dostoevsky calls him an ordinary Moscow fop of the upper class, an empty and chaotic soul fainéantis, but he was more, much more than this. As Merezhkovsky says, he came very near to solving the supreme mystery, to lifting the veil in the Holy of Holies. In the end, despairingly he has to cry, "I am a fallen fledgling lying on my back and crying in the high grass." He finds nothing, no faith, no God, for all his seeking. His path lay in pursuing his ideal through things terrestrial, in carrying on those moments when he rolled in self-admiration in his tub as a naked child, when he felt the fresh touch of the cherry tree boughs, like a child's kiss, against his face. In all literature there is no writer equal to Tolstoy in depicting the human body. He is accurate, simple and as short as possible, selecting only the few small unnoticed facial or personal features, and producing them gradually. He distributes them over the whole course of the story. The wife of Prince Andrei in Peace and War is forever recurring to our memory owing to the fact that we are constantly reminded of her short downy upper lip. Prince Andrei's sister, too, is always fixed in our minds owing to her trick of flushing in patches and walking heavily. There are countless instances of this. There is the long thin neck of Vrishchagin, the swollen neck of Prince Andrei, the rotundity of Platon Karateyev, the little white hand of Napoleon. All these details are impressed upon us with unwearying insistence until we come to realize that this is Tolstoy's peculiar method of unfolding before us the psychology of his characters. He has the gift of insight into the body of his dramatis personae. Think for a moment of Anna Karenina. Trait is added to trait, feature to feature. She has red lips, flashing grey eyes, and most noticeable of all, her hands are made to express her more even than her face. In them lies the whole charm of her person, the union of strength with delicacy. We learn that she always held herself exceptionally erect, that she has a quick, decisive gait. When she dances she has a distinguishing grace, sureness and lightness of movement. Tolstoy emphasizes again and again the roundness of her arms, the unruliness of her curls. The traits are so harmonized that they naturally and involuntarily unite, in the fancy of the reader, into one living, personal whole. We feel how easy and pleasant it is to the author to describe living bodies and their movements, not only of people, but also of animals. Even the Tartar footmen who wait on Levine are said to be broad-hipped, an unnecessary touch which shows us how much this sort of bodily accentuation can be carried to excess. For there is no doubt that Tolstoy relies on gestures where another writer would have had recourse to words. He uses this convertible connection between the external and the internal with inimitable art and exquisite effect. It is the silent smile of Natasha which decides the fate of Pierre far more effectively than any words. So peculiar is this gift that it has been said that the nervous susceptibility of people becomes different after reading Tolstoy's works. He notices what has escaped everyone else, and uses his discovery with a subtlety of effect that is startling. Thus it is to him that we are indebted for the simple but none the less surprising fact that a man's smile is reflected not only in his face, but also in the sound of his voice. Thus Platon Karateyev says something to Pierre in a voice changed by a smile. Tolstoy was the first to notice that horse hoofs have the queer effect of giving, as it were, a transparent sound. As we should expect from so animal-loving a man, Tolstoy sounds every note in sensation. He is equally able to fathom the sensation of her bared body to a young girl, before going to her first ball, and the feelings of an old woman worn out with childbearing, and those of a nursing mother who has not yet severed the mysterious connection of her body with that of her child. Even the sensations of animals are familiar to him. Not the least of his gifts to us is that he gave us new bodily sensations. He is the greatest portrayer of the physico-spiritual region in the natural man, that side of the spirit which most nearly approximates to the flesh. He is a man of the senses, half pagan, a fraction Christian, in the region of pure thought, where Dostoevsky walked at ease, superbly master, he is totally at a loss. But within the limits of the animal in man he is the supreme artist of the world. In War and Peace Tolstoy meant to give us what is commonly known as an historical novel. On laying it down we feel, not that we have lived in an age long past side by side with Napoleon, or fought at Borodino, but that these characters have been transplanted to our own age, and that he is depicting men and women whom we already know very well. The poverty of his historical coloring is amazing, where he depicts reality, the natural man. His language is distinguished by unequaled simplicity, strength and accuracy, but directly he gets onto the subject of abstract psychology he is lost, his very language seems to become helpless. When he leaves the passions of the heart for the passions of the mind he becomes obscure, ungrammatical and false. Compare Urteniev, the hero of childhood and youth, with Neklindov in Resurrection. The former is distinct, unforgettable, alive, the latter a lifeless abstraction, a dreary megaphone. He cannot create human souls with anything like the success he achieves with human bodies. We see this best of all in the case of Natasha, in War and Peace. She seems at the end of the book to have lost her soul in her body, and become a mere prolific she-animal, living solely for her children and husband. She has become divinely fleshly. We may run risks ourselves, but not for our children, she remarks to Pierre when he wishes to give away his property, echoing what Tolstoy's own wife said to him on a similar occasion. Austerlitz, Borodino, the burning of Moscow, Napoleon, all pass forgotten as if written on sand, but Natasha remains, Natasha, the eternal mother, triumphantly waving swaddling clothes, with a yellow stain instead of a green, the divine animal. The swallowing up of the human individual in the universal is Tolstoy's unvarying theme. Nature swallows up Uncle Yurushka, I die and the grass grows. Childbearing absorbs Natasha, sinful, destroying love swallows up Anna Karenina. She is all compact of love. Her words are poor. Tolstoy is always poor in dialogue. His excellence lies, as may have been guessed, in descriptions. One might almost say that his characters only speak because the mechanical conformation of their mouths admits of it. What do we know, for instance, of Anna? What does she think about children, people, duty, nature, art, life, death and God? We don't know. But, on the other hand, we do know exactly how her slender fingers taper at the end, what a round, polished neck she has, how her curls flutter on her neck and temples, every expression of her face, every movement of her body we do know. He probes the human till he reaches the animal, and so, as in the case of Vronsky's mare, Frou-Frou, he probes the animal till he reaches the human. He brings the likeness of God to the image of the beast. There are in Tolstoy's books no heroes, no characters, no personalities, and hence there is no tragedy, no catastrophe, no redeeming horror, no redeeming laughter. The principles are all clever, honorable, good, simple, naive or kindly, yet we never feel at home with them. There is always present that feeling with us that he lacks spiritual liberty, as Turgenev said. It is due entirely to his too great sense of the body, too little sense of the spirit. Chekhov, 1860–1904. Chekhov is to Russian literature what de Maupassant is to French, but he has none of the ribaldry of the great Frenchman. His stories deal with the middle classes, minor officials and the professional classes. Tolstoy looked upon him as a mere photographer, much in the same way that many Englishmen regard Galsworthy because of his amazing sense of detachment. But Chekhov has one quality not commonly found among photographers, and that is humor. Many of his stories are pathetic, but they are always lit up by a vein of gay drollery which adds to their subtlety and heightens the effect. It must always be remembered that he wrote at a period when Russia was in a peculiar state of stagnation. His work represents the reaction of flatness after a period of literary activity. Hence we are always coming up against words like ennui, grayness and so on. Half the people seemed to have run to seed playing vint. Turgenev painted the generation before, a generation that strove hard to evolve something out of life. Chekhov portrays a generation which had sunk back into torpor. The disease of oblomovism had a firm grip of them. He was born in South Russia, the son of a serf. Luckily he was given a good education, finishing at the University of Moscow, where he studied medicine. During the cholera epidemics of 1892 he volunteered to stand at the head of a medical district, and became acquainted with diverse characters, all of whom stood him in good stead when he took to writing, which he did very early in life. He attracted attention from the first in his volume of short humorous sketches. As his life went on he undertook more and more complicated problems and increased year by year in artistry. His great success lies in presenting the failures of human life, especially the failure of the educated man in the face of the all-pervading meanness of everyday life. I will treat first of his dramas. The Russians, it must be premised, go to the theatre to see what they would see off the stage. They are incurably realistic. They do not take a delight, as we do, in huge catastrophes. They like to see the trivial incidents of ordinary life reproduced with lifelike accuracy on the stage. He wrote in all 11 plays, 5 of which are serious. The remaining farces need not detain us. He discovered that life can be made interesting and dramatic with indulging in heroics. He is always human, and makes us feel moods and sensations over again which we have often felt before. He seems, in other words, to make his plays out of nothing, without having recourse to action or any extraordinary phenomena. We are not introduced to men and women stripped of the masks which they wear in ordinary life. His characters behave exactly as they would off the stage, and betray themselves as people do by a phrase, a gesture, the humming of a tune and the smell of a flower. In The Seagull we are introduced to the family of Sarin, whose sister is a famous actress called Arkadina. Preparations have been made for some private theatricals written by Arkadina's son, Konstantin. The chief part is to be played by Ina, the young daughter of a neighbor who is in love with Konstantin, who is full of ideals about reforming the stage. A well-known writer, Trigorin, a man of about 40, is staying with Sarin at the time. The play is acted, Arkadina labels it decadent, Konstantin gets annoyed. Ina after the performance is introduced to Trigorin. The daughter of an agent who has witnessed the performance, her name is Masha, confesses to a doctor visitor that she is in love with Konstantin, and the curtain falls on Act I. The second act takes place in the same house. Konstantin brings in a dead seagull, and lays it at Ina's feet as a symbol which she fails to understand. Trigorin in the course of a conversation with her tells her what it feels like to be a famous author. What is there so wonderful about it? Like a monomaniac, who is always thinking day and night of the moon, I am pursued by the one thought which I cannot get rid of. I must write, I must write, I must. I have scarcely finished a story when I must write a second, then a third, then a fourth. I write uninterruptedly, I cannot do otherwise. What is there so wonderful and splendid in this, I ask you? It is a cruel life. I get excited with you, and all the time I am remembering that an unfinished story is waiting for me. I see a cloud which is like a piano, and I at once think that I must remember to say somewhere in the story that there is a cloud like a piano. When I write it is pleasant, and it is nice to correct proofs, but as soon as the thing is published I cannot bear it, and I already see that it is not at all what I meant, that it is a mistake, that I should not have written it at all, and I am vexed and horribly depressed. The public reads it, and says, yes, pretty, full of talent, very nice, but how different from Tolstoy, or yes, a fine thing, but how far behind Fathers and Sons, Turgenev is better. And so, until I die, it will always be pretty and full of talent, never anything more, and when I die my friends as they pass my grave will say, here lies Trigorin, he was a good writer, but he did not write so well as Turgenev. This reads like that very rare thing in Chekhov, a confession of the author himself. However that may be, Ina replies that to her it is nonetheless a most wonderful gift that he possesses. For her part, for the joy of being an artist she would bear the hate of friends, want and disappointment. Trigorin then notices the seagull and is driven to turn it into copy at once. An idea has occurred to me, he says, for a short story. On the banks of a lake a young girl lives from her infancy. She loves the lake like a seagull, she is happy and free. Unexpectedly a man comes and sees her and out of mere idleness kills her, just like this seagull. That is the end of the second act. In the third act Ina has fallen in love with Trigorin. Constantine out of jealousy has tried unsuccessfully to kill himself and challenged Trigorin to a duel, of which he takes no notice. After a quarrel with his mother, which is made up, Constantine is inspired to take up the threads of life again. We now discover that Trigorin has been and is Arkadina's lover. Ina tells the famous author that she is going to follow him to Moscow and they part on a note of passion. 2 years elapse. In the fourth act we find that Constantine has become famous, Ina has gone on the stage and failed. She has had a child, which died, by Trigorin, he has returned to Arkadina and deserted Ina, who has been thrown over by her parents too. She enters and tells her story, and Constantine declares that he still loves her in spite of all, but she is still in love with Trigorin. Constantine, hearing this, can bear up no longer, but shoots himself. Such is the rather grim plot. The characterization is well nigh faultless, especially of Arkadina, the loving mother, who is quite unable to appreciate her son's talents, and of Trigorin, the weak, vain egoist, who is without a vestige of ill nature or malice. The Cherry Garden was his last play and sounds a note of hopefulness which re-echoes through all his stories. Though the present may be black and bitter, Chekhov always looks to a future where ideals shall once more reign. In the first act we see the return of a lady who is heavily burdened with debts to her estate in South Russia. It is the month of May and the cherry orchard is in full blossom. We get the exact atmosphere of the arrival of people from a journey and the return of a family to a home from which it has long been absent. The lady, Ranievska, is a child in financial matters and, Micawber-like, imagines that someone or something will turn up to extricate her out of her difficulties. A merchant neighbor of singular astuteness propounds a solution. If they cut down the cherry trees and let the land for villa holdings, they will ensure an income of £2,500 a year at least. They regard this idea as quite out of the question. They refuse to listen to such a ridiculous suggestion. They revert to their Micawber-like attitude and wait for an aunt to die and leave them a legacy and something of a like nature. In the third act we arrive at the day of the auction, when their house and property are to be sold over their heads. Nevertheless, they are holding a dance in spite of it. The merchant enters and announces that he has bought the cherry orchard. In the last act we see them leaving their house forever. The trees are already being cut down and the house is going to make room for neat suburban villas. The pathos and naturalness of this act are extraordinary. Every character in the play lives. It is historical and at the same time symbolical, because it shows us why the landed gentry in Russia has ceased to have any importance and how these unpractical, amiable people must go under when faced by energetic, rich, self-made men. The play seems to be about nothing, and yet every casual remark has always a definite purpose. Three Sisters represents the intense monotony of provincial life, relieved momentarily by a passing flash, and then rendered doubly grey by the disappearance of the flash. A regiment of artillery comes to the garrison of a small town. One of the three sisters, Masha, has married a schoolmaster. The two others, Irina and Olga, are living with their brother, who is a professor. Irina is in the telegraph office, Olga teaches. They live for one thing only, to get away and settle in Moscow. They only remain on Masha's account. Masha's husband is an exceedingly tedious schoolmaster, who is always reciting tags of Latin. Once his wife thought him the cleverest man in the world, now she thinks of him as the kindest but most tedious. When the play begins we hear of a new commander appointed to the battery. His name is Vershinin and he is married to a half-mad woman. Other officers are Baron Tuzenbach and Major Solony. The former is in love with Irina, who is willing to marry him but does not love him. Masha falls passionately in love with Vershinin. The major is jealous of Tuzenbach. Suddenly the battery is transferred to some remote corner of the country. Solony challenges the Baron and kills him. The three sisters are left alone, Vershinin bidding a passionate farewell to Masha, who does not even trouble to hide her grief from her husband. He in a most pathetic way tries to console her. Ina does not care even when she is told of the death of the Baron, and so the sisters are left to go on working in their misery, deprived even of the flash which promised to lend some color to their existence. It is, of course, impossible to deny that these plays are laden with gloom, but it is the darkness of the last hour before the dawn. Chekhov never despairs, he has an invincible trust in the coming day. He shows us how difficult life is, that there is nothing to be done but to continue working as cheerfully as we may, but in doing so he fulfilled the first condition of all great writing, he never failed to interest, and consequently his plays are, in spite of their somberness, a never-failing fount of inspiration and aesthetic delight. As a short story writer he has certainly no equal in Russia and few in any other country. Owing to the indefatigability of Mrs. Constance Garnett we now possess 8 volumes, all containing priceless cameos of Russian life, ranging through the humorous, the bizarre, the mystic, the unconventional and lawless to the pathetic, poignant and dramatic. He is unflinching in his realism, but passionately devoted to his search for truth and full of a poet's sensitiveness to beauty. He is softer, warmer, altogether kindlier than Maupassant. Even the odious characters are seen through the eyes of a kindly creator who never descends to hardness or bitterness. Indeed, this faculty of refraining from judging others is almost the most peculiar feature of Russian writers taken as a whole. They are many degrees nearer the kingdom of heaven than any other Christian country, if this virtue is really so valuable as the New Testament insists. There is nothing cynical in Chekhov's melancholy. He accepts the world with all its glaring, tangled skein of inconsequences and wickedness and foolishness and humorously transcribes what he sees in a mood of cool, scientific passivity blending with the sensibility of a sweet, wholesome, responsive nature. Unlike Dostoevsky, he seldom identifies himself with his unfortunate characters. The first story in the series edited by Mrs. Garnett is The Darling, which treats of a woman who shares her first husband's anxiety about his theatre, throws herself into the interests of the timber trade in which her second husband works, under the influence of her third begins to regard the campaign against the foot and mouth disease as the most important matter in the world and is finally left engrossed in grammatical questions and the interests of the little schoolboy in the big cap. She devotes herself with her whole being in each case to the man and the cause he represents. And Tolstoy in his criticism thinks that Chekhov set out to scoff at her inconstancy. Yet do we laugh at Dryden's frequent change of front? Is it not a sign of life and growth to throw oneself heart and soul into whatever pursuit may be immediately to one's hand? Certainly she loves absurd people, but love is sacred whatever the object of the affection. He, like Balaam, says Tolstoy, intended to curse, but the god of poetry forbade him, and commanded him to bless. And he did bless, and unconsciously clothed this sweet creature in such an exquisite radiance that she will always remain a type of what a woman can be in order to be happy herself, and to make the happiness of those with whom destiny throws her. But I do not feel convinced in my mind that Chekhov meant Olenka to excite our disgust or careless laughter. Where she loves there she loves wholeheartedly, her life is a blank, ready to take any impress, nor does she seek to erase any one of them until it is irrevocably removed from her. There are innumerable little touches deftly sketched in which make us feel not the ridiculousness or emptiness of the darling, but rather love her for her sensibility and power of loving. The main attraction of Chekhov for normal English readers is the shrewd psychology and the quick lightning flashes of nimble wit with which the text is strewn. As with his plays, so in his tales there is practically no plot. Passions spin the plot and mere catastrophic incident is not required. In Ariadne, for instance, we are more intrigued by the conversations about women in general, a favorite topic of conversation among the Russians, than by the events that take place. Listen, for instance, to this point of view. We want the creatures who bear us and our children to be superior to us and to everything in the world. But the trouble is that when we have been married for some 2 or 3 years, we begin to feel deceived and disillusioned, we pair off with others, and again, disappointment, again, reputation, and in the long run we become convinced that women are lying, trivial, fussy, unfair, undeveloped, cruel, in fact, far from being superior, are immeasurably inferior to us men. There are moments, too, when we could find it in our hearts to wish that Chekhov had given rein to his obvious gifts for scenic description. So many writers indulge in an orgy of nature panegyrics that we rarely want more from any man, and Chekhov very wisely subordinates everything to his main theme. But all the same we could well do with more of this sort of thing. Our homestead is on the high bank of a rapid stream, where the water chatters noisily day and night. Imagine a big old garden. Neat flower beds, beehives, a kitchen garden, and below it a river with leafy willows, which, when there is a heavy dew on them, have a lustreless look as though they had turned grey, and on the other side a meadow, and beyond the meadow on the upland a terrible, dark pine forest. In that forest delicious reddish ageries grow in endless profusion, and elks still live in its deepest recesses. When I am nailed up in my coffin I believe I shall still dream of those early mornings, you know, when the sun hurts your eyes, or the wonderful spring evenings when the nightingales and the landrails call in the garden and beyond the garden, and sounds of the harmonica float across from the village, while they play the piano indoors and the stream babbles, when there is such music, in fact, that one wants at the same time to cry and to sing aloud. But it is for little character sketches like this of Lubkov, who would sometimes stand still before some magnificent landscape and say, "It would be nice to have tea here," that endears Chekhov to us so conclusively. It is certainly sound psychology and good for a young lover to learn by heart. It would save endless heartaches and 1,000 other natural shocks the flesh is heir to if they did. This aphorism, a woman will forgive you audacity and insolence, but she will never forgive your reasonableness. It is with more than a thrill of delight that we read of so exquisitely apt a simile as that for the girl who had refused a wealthy but utterly insignificant prince and then immediately fretted at her decision. Just as a peasant pouts with repulsion at a mug of kvass with cockroaches in it but yet drinks it, so she frowned disdainfully at the recollection of the prince. The story from which these extracts are taken is an amazingly true psychological study of a girl whose coldness only made her more sensual. She lived solely for the purpose of attracting men, was deceitful when deceit was unnecessary, able to appear cultured in society and yet be in reality superstitious, bigoted, illiterate and devoid of all taste. She is half a human beast already, says the misogynist, who had given up everything to please Ariadne, speaking of educated women generally. Thanks to her, a great deal of what had been won by human genius has been lost again. The woman gradually disappears and in her place is the primitive female. Of course a woman's a woman and a man's a man. But can all that be as simple in our day as it was before the flood, and can it be that I, a cultivated man endowed with a complex spiritual organization, ought to explain the intense attraction I feel towards a woman simply by the fact that her bodily formation is different from mine? To get on terms with a woman is easy enough, he concludes. You have only to undress her, but afterwards what a bore it is, what a silly business. And now, by way of a change, let me just lightly give the plots of the following few stories. In Polinka we are simply invited to listen to the conversation over the counter of a little milliner and a draper's assistant who loves her and objects to her being led astray by a young medical student. The poignancy of the tale lies in the fact that the conversation, which is quite tragic, has to take place in public and therefore covered by discussions about buttons and corsets. Eninta describes the misery of a kept mistress of a medical student who is tired of her. The Two Volodiyas shows us a girl who has married one elderly Volodiya pining for the affection of another Volodiya, who treats her as a child who has to be humored. He told her that she was like a little dog waiting for a bit of ham to be thrown to it. Then he sat her on his knee, and dancing her up and down like a child, hummed, "Tarara-boom die, tarara-boom die." The Trousseau gives us a pathetic picture of a wife and daughter in some dull, out-the-way place preparing year in, year out, material for her bottom drawer, the girl after all dying before she met anyone who wanted to marry her. The helpmate describes the doings of a suspicious husband who finds that his wife is corresponding secretly. He offers to set his wife free in order that she may marry her lover. We hear of a mother-in-law who aids her daughter in her immorality, delightfully touched in a phrase that cuts like a lash, a stout lady with small predatory features like a weasel, who loved her daughter to distraction and helped her in everything. If her daughter were strangling someone, the mother would not have protested but would only have screened her with her skirts. The wife refuses to accept a divorce because it will lower her status and perhaps her lover will throw her over. He is younger than she is. In an artist's story we get some invaluable hints on the problem of the education of the masses. The whole horror of their position, says the artist, lies in their never having time to think of their souls, of their image and resemblance. Cold, hunger, animal terror, a burden of toil, like avalanches of snow, block for them every way to spiritual activity, that is, to what distinguishes man from the brutes and what is the only thing which makes life worth living. The people must be freed from hard physical labor, we must lighten their yoke, let them have time to breathe, that they may not spend all their lives at the stove, at the wash-tub, and in the fields, but may also have time to think of God, may have time to develop their spiritual capacities. The highest vocation of man is spiritual activity, the perpetual search for truth and the meaning of life. Make coarse animal labor unnecessary for them, let them feel themselves free, and then you will see what a mockery these dispensaries and books are. Once a man recognizes his true vocation, he can only be satisfied by religion, science, and art, and not by these trifles. Take upon yourself a share of their labor. If all of us, townspeople and country people, all without exception, would agree to divide between us the labor which mankind spends on the satisfaction of their physical needs, each of us would perhaps need to work only for 2 or 3 hours a day. What is needed is not elementary education, but freedom for a wide development of spiritual capacities. If one must cure, it should not be diseases, but the causes of them. Remove the principal cause, physical labor, and then there will be no disease. We have plenty of doctors, chemists, lawyers, plenty of people can read and write, but we are quite without biologists, mathematicians, philosophers, poets. The whole of our intelligence, the whole of our spiritual energy, is spent on satisfying temporary, passing needs. The story itself, however, concerns the love of an artist for a girl who disobeys the dictates of her heart and gives up her happiness at her sister's behest without question. The passage where the artist hears that his chance of real abiding love has been snatched from him is peculiarly Chekhov-like at his most poignant. He goes, full of hope and ecstasy, to meet his beloved and hears her sister, who dislikes him, giving a dictation lesson. "God sent a crow," she said in a loud, emphatic voice, probably dictating. God sent a crow a piece of cheese. A crow, a piece of cheese. "Who's there?" she called suddenly, hearing my steps. "It's I. Excuse me. I cannot come out to you this minute, I'm giving Dasha her lesson." "Is Ekaterina Pavlovna in the garden?" "No, she went away with my sister this morning to our aunt in the province of Penza. And in the winter they will probably go abroad," she added after a pause. God sent the crow a piece of cheese. Have you written it? I went into the hall and stared vacantly at the pond and the village, and the sound reached me of a piece of cheese. God sent the crow a piece of cheese. In 3 years, a somewhat longer tale, we read of the gradually waning affection between husband and wife and their reconciliation. Very deftly does the author show us the difference between the passion which Laptev felt for Yulia at the beginning and his feeling at the end when she tells him how dear he is to her, though he kept smiling at her and her beautiful neck with a sort of joyous shyness as a sign of the new birth of his love. Yet we read that when she put her arm round his neck he cautiously removed her hand. The mingled emotions are exquisitely rendered. His longest story is the duel, and in it we hear of a neurasthenic, Levsky, who finds that living with a woman who has read Spencer and followed you to the ends of the earth is no more interesting than living with any Amphissa or Kulina. There's the same smell of ironing, of powder, and of medicines, the same curl papers every morning, the same self-deception. He tries every means in his power to raise money by loan to leave the Caucasus and his mistress. There is a clear-headed, cold-blooded zoologist called von Karen who despises Levsky for his degeneracy. He thus analyzes Levsky's character: his existence is confined like an egg within its shell. Whether he walks or sits, is angry, writes, rejoices, it may all be reduced to wine, cards, slippers and women. He has had great success with women, and therein lies his noxiousness. He is a failure, a superfluous man, a victim of the age. Meanwhile Levski's mistress had been philandering with other men. He discovers her infidelity just when he is on the point of fighting a duel with von Karen. He was wounded but slightly and became reconciled to his wife, while von Karen was the one to go away, leaving lover and mistress almost happy in each other's society. Mais is a horrible story about two men, neither of whom was able to resist the fascinations of a Jewess prostitute. Neighbors is an account of a visit paid by a brother to his sister who had run away with a married man. His first intention is to wreak his vengeance on her lover for the dishonor he had brought upon his house, but he remains as their friend. At Home gives us a picture of the dull monotony of life in the country. A girl returns to her aunt's house and out of sheer boredom is induced to marry the local doctor. Expensive Lessons shows the unrequited passion of a research student for a poor French governess whom he had hired to teach him French. The Princess tells of a rich girl who likes to see others happy and revels in the thought that she is the means of making many content who otherwise would not be. She is taken severely to task by a doctor who tries to show her her true character as seen by her inferiors. You look upon the mass of mankind from the Napoleonic standpoint as food for the cannon. But Napoleon had at least some idea. You have nothing except aversion. Your philanthropic work has been a farce from the beginning. There was nothing but the desire to amuse yourself with living puppets. He says too much, is frightened and apologizes, and the princess goes from him once more reinstated to her former position of Lady Bountiful in her own mind. "How happy I am," she murmured, shutting her eyes. "How happy I am." The Chemist's Wife is a charming trifle dealing with a country town in which an officer and a doctor knock up a chemist late at night on the pretext of wanting some peppermints, in reality to talk to the pretty young wife of the chemist. She is flattered, adventure has at last come her way. She stays some time downstairs talking to them while her husband sleeps. Reluctantly her visitors leave her, and when she is once more in bed return, this time waking her husband, who attends to them himself. 2 minutes later the chemist's wife saw Obviosov go out of the shop, and after he had gone some steps she saw him throw the packet of peppermints on the dusty road. The doctor came from behind a corner to meet him. They met, and gesticulating, vanished in the morning mist. "How unhappy I am," said the chemist's wife, looking angrily at her husband, who was undressing quickly to get into bed again. "Oh, how unhappy I am," she repeated. "And nobody knows, nobody knows." "I forgot fourpence on the counter," muttered the chemist, pulling the quilt over him. "Put it away in the till, please." And at once he fell asleep again. In The Lady with the Dog we get one of those notes of optimism which are so characteristic of Chekhov, just where the normal writer would be pessimistic. The monotonous hollow sound of the sea, rising up from below, spoke of the peace, of the eternal sleep awaiting us. In this constancy, in this complete indifference to the life and death of each of us, there lies hid, perhaps, a pledge of our eternal salvation, of the unceasing movement of life upon earth, of unceasing progress towards perfection. The story is about a married man who conceives a violent passion for a married woman whom he meets while on holiday. Anna and he loved each other like people very close and akin, like husband and wife, like tender friends. It seemed to them that fate itself had meant them for one another, and they could not understand why he had a wife and she a husband, and it was as though they were a pair of birds of passage, caught and forced to live in different cages. They forgave each other for what they were ashamed of in their past. They forgave everything in the present, and felt that this love of theirs had changed them both. By far the greater number of Chekhov's tales deal with the illicit loves of married women. Young girls are compelled to marry husbands who are distasteful to them, and in after years they revenge themselves by giving themselves to sprucer, cleaner, stronger men who flit into and out of their lives only too quickly. In A Doctor's Visit, Chekhov harks back again to a subject which is always dear to him, the uselessness of modern labor. In this case 2,000 workpeople work without rest in unhealthy surroundings making bad cotton goods. For what purpose? The factory owner's family are unhappy. The only one who enjoys her life is Kristina Dmitrievna, the governess, a stupid, middle-aged maiden lady in pince-nez. All these 5 blocks of buildings are at work, and inferior cotton is sold in the eastern markets, simply that Kristina Dmitrievna may eat stolé and drink Madeira. The doctor who is called in to attend the daughter of the house ventures on a criticism of present-day life. Our generation sleep badly, are restless, talk a great deal, and are always trying to settle whether we are right or not. For our children or grandchildren that question will have been settled. Things will be clearer for them than for us. Life will be good in 50 years' time. Ionich shows us Chekhov in another characteristic vein. Here he indulges in one of his favorite tricks, that of divulging the foolishness of his dramatis personae through their idiotic conversation. Ivan Petrovich is an irritating buffoon whose idea of wit is to repeat ad nauseam phrases like "how do you do," "if you please," and "not badsome." Chekhov's sense of irony is well shown in the following passage which occurs in this story. Then they all sat down in the drawing room with very serious faces and Vera Iosifovna read her novel. It began like this: the frost was intense. The windows were wide open, from the kitchen came the clatter of knives and the smell of fried onions. It was comfortable in the soft deep armchair. The lights had such a friendly twinkle in the twilight of the drawing room, and at the moment on a summer evening when sounds of voices and laughter floated in from the street and whiffs of lilac from the yard, it was difficult to grasp that the frost was intense, and that the setting sun was lighting with its chilly rays a solitary wayfarer on the snowy plain. Vera read how a beautiful young countess founded a school, a hospital, a library, in her village, and fell in love with a wandering artist. She read of what never happens in real life, and yet it was pleasant to listen, it was comfortable, and such agreeable, serene thoughts kept coming into the mind one had no desire to get up. Not badsome, Ivan said softly. Hugius, thank you, most dumbly were among the sallies of wit which Ivan hurled at his audience from time to time. The object of the story is as usual to emphasize the uselessness of the narrow lives of the inhabitants of a provincial town where men and women did absolutely nothing, took no interest in anything and looked askance at anyone who tried to speak intelligently on any topic of importance. There was nothing to do except eat and play vint. Cheof shows us these people growing older but otherwise changing not at all, dragging down to their level even those who in their youth endeavored to break loose from the bondage of aimlessness and inertia. There is, however, a side of Cheof which one would not expect in so relentless a realist. In the Black Monk we cross the border of the unseen and are in the society of mystics. No writer has so severely handled those who rely on old wives' fables and ignorant superstitions, but in this story he probes far down into the spiritual world and comes into line with Dostoevsky in a field which we are astonished to see him approach. The phantom that appears periodically to Khofrin and so enhances his happiness may be an hallucination. It is completely in the vein of Smerdyakov and Ivan the Brothers Karamazov, though the conclusions are very different. And what is the object of eternal life? Asks Khofrin of the Black Monk, and the spirit answers, as of all life, enjoyment. True enjoyment lies in knowledge, and eternal life provides innumerable and inexhaustible sources of knowledge, and in that sense it has been said, "In my Father's house there are many mansions." One of Cheof's most remarkable traits is his capacity for getting right inside the very body of his characters. In an anonymous story, with a sureness of touch that we can only wonder at, he paints for us the hardships of a flunkey's life. Just as Turgenev seems to have been able to see into the most secret recesses of a young girl's heart, so Cheof can put on the guise of an old man or a young boy lover, a jealous wife or an unfaithful husband, a garrulous father or a feckless waster at will, and actually become them for 10, 20, 50 pages at a time without once giving us a chance to doubt the truth of his creation. There are moments when we imagine that he leans rather to that side of life which we associate with authorship, hatred of domesticity. So many of his characters fall foul of conjugal relationships, but it is one of his worst characters who says that love is only a simple physical need, like the need for food or clothes, and instances the French workman who spends 10 sous on dinner, 5 sous on wine, 5 or 10 sous on women, and devotes his brain and nerves entirely to his work, and it is surely the voice of Cheof himself who replies, "Your everlasting attacks on female logic, lying, weakness and so on, doesn't it look like a desire at all costs to force women down into the mud that she may be on the same level as your attitude to her?" There are many places in this long anonymous story where Cheof himself seems to be speaking to us across the footlights. It is his voice again that I hear in Zinaida's "The meaning of life is to be found only in one thing, fighting. To get one's heel on the vile head of the serpent and to crush it. That's the meaning of life. In that alone or in nothing. In the pseudo-valets one can serve an idea in more than one calling. If one has made a mistake and lost faith in one, one may find another. and once more in man finds his true destiny in nothing if not in self-sacrificing love for his neighbor. And lastly, in the same man's all I ask for is an objective attitude to life. The more objective, the less danger of falling into error. One must look into the root of things and try to see in every phenomenon a cause of all the other causes. We have grown feeble, slack, degraded, in fact. Our generation is entirely composed of neurasthenics and whimperers. We do nothing but talk of fatigue and exhaustion. Life is only given us once and one wants to live it boldly, with full consciousness and beauty. One wants to play a striking, independent, noble part. One wants to make history so that those generations may not have the right to say of each of us that we were nonentities or worse. Why should my ego be lost? But if I had to select one characteristic story of Chekhov's to illustrate his method more perfectly than any other, I should choose The Husband. It is simply on account of a tax collector and his wife going to a dance held in honor of the coming of a regiment to the town. The wife, under the influence of the music, the drink and the unaccustomed society, begins to revel in the function. Her husband immediately orders her to return home, merely to satisfy a whim. The final paragraphs of the story, in which we see the wretched couple walking home in the dark, the mud slushing under their feet, choking with hatred of each other, are inimitable. The fourth volume of Tales is called The Party, and contains a wonderful story called Terror, in which we again get Chekhov's favorite plot of a man making love to his friend's wife. The terror lies in the fact that the man loves his wife while she is indifferent to him and gives herself to her husband's friend, who leaves her as soon as he has won her. In a woman's kingdom he reverts to machinery and capital, and in passing introduces a very sound criticism of Maupassant's work. The Kiss, which is just the story of an officer being kissed in the dark in mistake for somebody else, is a supreme example of Chekhov's genius in making a completely successful story out of the merest trifle. The teacher of literature is a man who chafes, as so many of Chekhov's heroes do, at the littleness of life. I am surrounded, he writes in his diary, by vulgarity, and vulgarity. Wearisome, insignificant people, pots of sour cream, jugs of milk, cockroaches, stupid women. There is nothing more terrible, mortifying, and distressing than vulgarity. I must escape, I must escape. In Volume 5, The Wife is a poignantly pathetic story of a man who loves his wife desperately but meets with no response to his affection. It differs from other tales of the same sort in that the wife in this case states most plainly and forcibly exactly why they fail to get on. You bring suffocation, oppression, she says, something insulting and humiliating to the utmost degree. Law and morality are such that a self-respecting healthy young woman has to spend her life in idleness, in depression, and in continual apprehension, and to receive board and lodging from a man she does not love. Difficult people shows us, as Chekhov is fond of doing, a family in the process of bickering and squabbling from day to day. The Grasshopper is the picture of a married girl who jumps from one lover to another, only realizing the purity and greatness of her husband when he dies heroically. A dreary story is the notebook of an old man who is about to die, having achieved fame but not found happiness. In this story there is a magnificent description of the fascination of lecturing. No kind of sport, he concludes, no kind of game or diversion, has ever given me such enjoyment as lecturing. Only at lectures have I been able to abandon myself entirely to passion, and have understood that inspiration is not an invention of the poets, but exists in real life, and I imagine Hercules after the most piquant of his exploits felt just such voluptuous exhaustion as I experience after every lecture. We feel again that some autobiographical thread of the author's is creeping in when he makes his old man say, "I am interested in nothing but science." I still believe that science is the most important, the most splendid, the most essential thing in the life of man, that it always has been and will be the highest manifestation of love, and that only by means of it will man conquer himself and nature. The remaining stories in the volume, which are peculiar in that they are linked by having characters in common, dwell on the evils of Cheoph's days, the listlessness of the educated public, the refusal to break out of the case or the groove, the general hypnotism and blindness to suffering of the so-called happy. There ought to be, says the hero in Gooseberries, behind the door of every happy, contented man someone standing with a hammer continually reminding him with a tap that there are unhappy people. We learn in About Love that Cheoph's apprenticeship to medicine taught me one invaluable lesson as an artist, to individualize each case. In the sixth and last volume we have The Witch, which gives its name to the volume, which is parallel with The Chemist's Wife in that it again shows a wife dissatisfied with her husband endeavoring to secure a moment's romance with a postman who has lost his way. Peasant Wives dwells on the unfaithfulness of women, and in A Gay Fire he reverts to the style and plot of The Witch. Gusv is a horrible story of a man dying at sea. When dead his body is sewn up and thrown into the water, where he is eaten by a shark. In the ravine is a picture of a girl not very different in her calculated brutality and heartlessness from Regan and Goneril. It is one of the most powerful stories that Cheof ever wrote. As a short story writer, Cheof stands in a unique position. He relies very little on plot, he is interested only in characters. Every one of his creations stands out definitely and clearly, and though he points no moral, it is easy to come to quite certain conclusions with regard to his own view on life. He obviously regards women as frail, easily dissatisfied, just as he looks upon the men of his age as invertebrate, lacking in energy, ideals, or any sense of the nobility of work. His scenic descriptions are clear-cut and beautiful, not less effective because they are so sparingly used. He is obviously puzzled by the why and wherefore of existence, and refuses to shut his eyes when he finds himself confronted by uncomfortable truths. But his main feature is his incurable optimism. He has no very great opinion of the men of his own day, but it is easy to see that he has unbounded faith in the future, and to stigmatize such a writer as gloomy only betrays the impotence and wrong-headedness of the critic. Transcriber's note: Inconsistent hyphenation has been left as written. Dialect has been left as written, for example take. However, obvious typos, outside of speech, have been corrected. Asterisk 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 end of the Project Gutenberg ebook. Why we should read asterisk 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 updated editions will replace the previous one, the old editions will be renamed. Creating the works from print editions not protected by U.S. copyright law means that no one owns a United States copyright in these works, so the Foundation, and you, can copy and distribute it in the United States without permission and without paying copyright royalties. Special rules, set forth in the general terms of use part of this license, apply to copying and distributing Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works to protect the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol concept and trademark. Project Gutenberg is a registered trademark, and may not be used if you charge for an ebook, except by following the terms of the trademark license, including paying royalties for use of the Project Gutenberg trademark. If you do not charge anything for copies of this ebook, complying with the trademark license is very easy. You may use this ebook for nearly any purpose, such as creation of derivative works, reports, performances and research. Project Gutenberg ebooks may be modified and printed and given away. You may do practically anything in the United States with ebooks not protected by U.S. copyright law. Redistribution is subject to the trademark license, especially commercial redistribution. Start. Full license. The full Project Gutenberg license. Please read this before you distribute or use this work to protect the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol mission of promoting the free distribution of electronic works, by using or distributing this work, or any other work associated in any way with the phrase Project Gutenberg. You agree to comply with all the terms of the full Project Gutenberg trademark symbol license available with this file or online at www.gutenberg.org/license. Section 1. General Terms of Use and Redistributing Project Gutenberg Trademark Symbol Electronic Works 1.0. By reading or using any part of this Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic work, you indicate that you have read, understand, agree to and accept all the terms of this license and intellectual property, trademark/copyright, agreement. If you do not agree to abide by all the terms of this agreement, you must cease using and return or destroy all copies of Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works in your possession. If you paid a fee for obtaining a copy of or access to a Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic work and you do not agree to be bound by the terms of this agreement, you may obtain a refund from the person or entity to whom you paid the fee as set forth in paragraph 1.e.8. 1.b. Project Gutenberg is a registered trademark. It may only be used on or associated in any way with an electronic work by people who agree to be bound by the terms of this agreement. There are a few things that you can do with most Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works even without complying with the full terms of this agreement. See paragraph 1.c below. There are a lot of things you can do with Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works if you follow the terms of this agreement and help preserve free future access to Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works. See paragraph 1.e below. 1.c. The Project Gutenberg Literary Archive Foundation, the foundation or PGLAF, owns a compilation copyright in the collection of Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic works. Nearly all the individual works in the collection are in the public domain in the United States. If an individual work is unprotected by copyright law in the United States and you are located in the United States, we do not claim a right to prevent you from copying, distributing, performing, displaying or creating derivative works based on the work as long as all references to Project Gutenberg are removed. Of course, we hope that you will support the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol mission of promoting free access to electronic works by freely sharing Project Gutenberg trademark symbol works in compliance with the terms of this agreement for keeping the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol name associated with the work. You can easily comply with the terms of this agreement by keeping this work in the same format with its attached full Project Gutenberg trademark symbol license when you share it without charge with others. 1.d. The copyright laws of the place where you are located also govern what you can do with this work. Copyright laws in most countries are in a constant state of change. If you are outside the United States, check the laws of your country in addition to the terms of this agreement before downloading, copying, displaying, performing, distributing or creating derivative works based on this work or any other Project Gutenberg trademark symbol work. The Foundation makes no representations concerning the copyright status of any work in any country other than the United States. 1.e Unless you have removed all references to Project Gutenberg. 1.e.1. The following sentence, with active links to, or other immediate access to, the full Project Gutenberg trademark symbol license must appear prominently whenever any copy of a Project Gutenberg trademark symbol work, any work on which the phrase Project Gutenberg appears, or with which the phrase Project Gutenberg is associated, is accessed, displayed, performed, viewed, copied or distributed. This ebook is for the use of anyone anywhere in the United States and most other parts of the world at no cost and with almost no restrictions whatsoever. You may copy it, give it away or reuse it under the terms of the Project Gutenberg license included with this ebook or online at www.gutenberg.org. If you are not located in the United States, you will have to check the laws of the country where you are located before using this ebook. 1.e.2. If an individual Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic work is derived from texts not protected by U.S. copyright law, does not contain a notice indicating that it is posted with permission of the copyright holder, the work can be copied and distributed to anyone in the United States without paying any fees or charges. If you are redistributing or providing access to a work with the phrase Project Gutenberg associated with or appearing on the work, you must comply either with the requirements of paragraphs 1.e.1 through 1.e.7 or obtain permission for the use of the work and the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol trademark as set forth in paragraphs 1.e.8 or 1.e.9. 1.e.3. If an individual Project Gutenberg trademark symbol electronic work is posted with the permission of the copyright holder, your use and distribution must comply with both paragraphs 1.e.1 through 1.e.7 and any additional terms imposed by the copyright holder. Additional terms will be linked to the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol license for all works posted with the permission of the copyright holder found at the beginning of this work. 1.e.4. Do not unlink or detach or remove the full Project Gutenberg trademark symbol license terms from this work, or any files containing a part of this work or any other work associated with Project Gutenberg trademark symbol. 1.e.5. Do not copy, display, perform, distribute or redistribute this electronic work, or any part of this electronic work, without prominently displaying the sentence set forth in paragraph 1.e.1 with active links or immediate access to the full terms of the Project Gutenberg trademark symbol license. 1.e.6. You may convert to and distribute this work in any binary, compressed, marked up, non-proprietary or proprietary form, including any word processing or hypertext form. However, if you provide access to or distribute copies of a Project Gutenberg trademark symbol work in a format other than plain vanilla ASCII or other format used in the official version posted on the official Project Gutenberg trademark symbol website, www.gutenberg.org, you must, at no additional cost, fee or expense to the user, provide a copy, a means of exporting a copy, or a means of obtaining a copy upon request, of the work in its original plain vanilla ASCII or other form. Any alternate format must include the full Project Gutenberg trademark symbol license as specified in paragraph 1.e.1. 1.e.7. Do not charge a fee for access to, viewing, displaying, performing, copying or distributing any Project Gutenberg trademark symbol works unless you comply with paragraph 1.e.8 or 1.